Hi, welcome to my channel Mostly Knitting. I'm Tash and this is a special episode where I'm going to talk about DK or worsted weight hat patterns. I'm going to focus on patterns that have a brim and that are made either with just ribbing or stockinette or a combination of both. Because these patterns are DK or worsted weight, they should be fairly quick to make, and they also make good social knitting because they don't have any complicated patterning to follow. I really like making hats. They're great projects to have on the needles. They're quick, they're portable, they don't use too much yarn, so you can often use leftovers for them, and they make great gifts. So I've made hundreds of hats over the years. I had a look on Ravelry and I've got over 200 recorded there. But I've noticed that it's been more in the last couple of years that I've been enjoying making hats that have a brim. So that's why I'm focusing on that in this episode. I think for a number of reasons. I think I like personally how they look on my head better. And I also think they keep you just that little bit warmer with that extra layer of fabric. So in the time that I've been recording weekly videos on YouTube, I've made 3 hats in this category that I can think of. One of them's a classic ribbed hat by Purl Soho, and that's a free pattern, and I've made that once. Another one is the Manhattan hat by Tori Yu, and I've made that once. That's a $7 US pattern. And another hat in this category that I've made is the Oslo Hat, or the Oslo Hat with mohair by Petite Knit, and that's a 35 Danish kroner pattern, which is about $5 US at the moment. And I've made a few versions of that. So I won't go into detail on those particular hats because I've already referred to them in previous episodes, but in the description below I'll refer to which episodes I discussed those. So today's video is actually 10 hat patterns that I haven't made yet that are in my queue that are in this kind of category of DK / worsted weight hat pattern. It's got to have a brim, plain, like either plain stockinette or ribbing or a combination of both. And some of them are free and some of them are paid for patterns. So in preparing for this video, I've had a look at the patterns themselves, if they're free or if I already own them. And I've also looked at people's projects on Ravelry and any comments on Ravelry on the patterns themselves. Right, so let's get started. I'm going to start with the free patterns first. The first hat on my list is 2x2 by Gagnon, and it's a free pattern released in 2015. It features a 2x2 rib over the whole hat, and it's knit on a 4mm needle. The gauge is 22 stitches in a 2x2 rib, and it's designed for a DK or a light worsted yarn similar to Cascade 220. 100 grams should be enough to knit the hat. It's knit bottom up, and it has really lovely crown decreases. There are around 7,800 projects on Ravelry, and is just the one size for the pattern. The cast on is 112 stitches. To keep the decreases in pattern, you can only increase or decrease in 16 stitch increments. Some people who have made it with a heavier yarn have decreased down 16 stitches to 96 stitches, so that would be a yarn similar to, say, Malabrigo worsted or Brooklyn tweed shelter. If you were using that kind of yarn, you might want to cast on 96 stitches. Or if you were making it for someone with a larger head, that kind of yarn could work with a 112 stitch cast on. When I looked at the question or the comments on Ravelry, there were no replies by the designer. Now it is a free pattern, so there's no designer support. But one person, Erica W. Knits, answered a lot of people's questions about 4 months ago. So if you have a question, you might want to take a look at the comments and see if your query has been answered by that Ravelry user who is not the designer, but just answered a lot of people's questions. The second hat on my list is the Jacques Cousteau hat by Lalla Pohjanpalo. It's a free pattern and it was released in 2006. It also features a 2x2 rib and was knit on a 3.5mm needle. The gauge is 22 stitches in a 2x2 rib, also on a DK / light worsted yarn, similar to Cascade 220. Again, one skein should be enough, and it's also bottom up. There are about 7,800 projects on Ravelry, and there are 2 sizes, 120 stitches or 140 stitches. I did notice in people's comments on their project pages that a number of people have made a few edits with the way they did the decreases. So if you're making this hat, you might want to take a look at the people's projects on Ravelry. The third hat on my list is the classic cuffed hat by Purl Soho. It's also a free pattern, but it's not one that's downloadable. You actually have to go to the Purl Soho website, and it was released in 2014. This one has a 1x1 rib for the cuff and then stockinette for the brim. It's knit on a 3.75mm needle for the cuff and a 4.5mm needle for the stockinette, and the gauge is 20 stitches in stockinette. Again, that would suit a DK or light worsted yarn. It's knit bottom up, and there are over 9,400 projects on Ravelry at the moment. It comes in 3 sizes, baby, child and adult, and the adult cast on is 88 stitches. The decreases in the hat are 4-point paired decreases. It's a fairly common decrease style for a hat, where you have 4 sections where you decrease on either side of those 4 markers, where you're decreasing 8 stitches, usually every other round to begin with. The 4th hat on my list is the 815 hat by stadtkindknits, and it's a free pattern, the last free pattern on my list, and it was released in 2019. It features a 1x1 rib over the whole hat, and it's knit on a 4.5mm needle. The gauge is 23 stitches in the 1x1 rib, and some people have used an Aran weight yarn and some have used a worsted, so I have included it in this list. It's a bottom up hat, and it has really nice crown decreases. There are 452 projects on Ravelry. The cast on for the adult medium size is 92 stitches, and it also has those 4-point paired decreases. There are some alternate pattern instructions for a less pointy hat if you don't like the point at the top. The rest of the patterns are paid for patterns. The 5th pattern on my list is the Porty hat by Ysolda Teague. It costs £6, which is approximately $7.65 US at the moment, and it was released in 2021. This one is a different kind of pattern because you can actually use any weight of yarn. The cast on is the same. It's knit top down, and you just increase to a different stitch count depending on the yarn weight. So you'll actually measure your gauge as you go, and then depending on your gauge and the size that you're making will depend on your final stitch count. There are 590 projects on Ravelry, and it comes in 4 sizes: baby, child, adult, and adult large. It does feature a little tiny little point on the top of the hat, which some people have increased a little bit more rapidly to get rid of that point on the top. So if you wanted to get rid of that, you could take a look at people's project pages on Ravelry to see what they did, if that was a feature that you didn't want to have in your hat. The next 3 hats on my list are all Petite Knit hats, and they're all 35 Danish kroner, which is around $5 US at the moment. They're all designed for a DK light worsted type yarn like Sandesgarn Double Sunday or Peer Gynt. So I'll start with the weekend hat. That was released in 2023. It's a 1x1 rib over the whole hat, knit on a 3.5mm needle, and the gauge is 24 stitches in a 1x1 rib. It's knit bottom up, and it has a bit of a point on the top. There are over 2,300 projects on Ravelry, and it comes in 6 sizes. It looks like it has 4-point paired decreases, and I could see from people's project pages that a large size has 120 stitch cast on. This hat is meant to have a double fold brim, so 3 layers of thickness, but I think personally this would be too thick with a DK weight yarn, so I would do a tubular cast on and a single fold, which would be double thick around the brim. The 7th hat on my list is the Hipster hat, also by Petite Knit, and it was released in 2017. It features a 2x2 rib over the whole hat, and the gauge is 29 stitches in 2x2 rib on a 3.5mm needle. It's knit bottom up, and it has a point on the top and a single fold brim. There are over 6,000 projects on Ravelry, and it comes in 4 sizes: baby, child, woman and man. I did notice when I was looking at the comments on Ravelry that people referred to the similarity between this hat and the 2x2 hat by Gagnon, the first one that was on my list. So if you like the look of this hat, you might want to consider the 2x2 hat, which is free. This hat also needs a multiple of 16 stitches for the decreases, similar to the 2x2 hat, so they do sound like quite similar patterns. The 8th hat on my list, and the last one by Petite Knit, is the Stockholm hat, and that was released in 2018. It has a 1x1 rib over the whole hat. On a 4mm needle, the gauge is 28 stitches in a 1x1 rib. It's knit bottom up, and it features that kind of duckbill point on the top, which looks a lot like the Manhattan hat by Tori Yu. That pattern was released in 2022. There are over 1,900 projects on Ravelry, and it just comes in the one size. It features a tubular cast on of 104 stitches, although I have seen that Petite Knit says you can add multiples of 4 to adjust for sizing. She's mentioned that in the comments. The 9th pattern on my list is the Essential Beanie by Andrea Gaughan, and this one cost $10 and it was released in 2023. A feature of this pattern is that it is designed for any weight of yarn, and the needle size that you use will depend on the weight. It's a 2x2 rib over the whole hat, and it's knit bottom up. There are 240 projects on Ravelry, and it comes in 4 sizes: child, adult small, adult medium, and adult large. It looks like there are 4-point paired decreases. It also looks quite a lot like the 2x2 hat by Gagnon, but this one is designed for any weight of yarn. The 10th and last pattern on my list is the Ole Hat by Susanne Muller, who is Paula strict, and it costs €3.78, which is approximately $4 at the moment. It was released in 2020, and although it looks like a 1x1 rib, it's actually a half fisherman's rib over the whole hat. So it's knit on a 3mm needle with a gauge of 22 stitches. It's knit bottom up, and there are 715 projects on Ravelry. There are 4 sizes, and each size comes in a range, but the smallest size, the bottom range, is 46 centimeters, and the largest is 61 centimeters. So hopefully out of those 10 patterns, there's at least one that's caught your eye and you might be interested in making. I've put all of them in my queue, and my goal is to make one each week, and then I'll share about them in my weekly videos. If you've made any of these patterns, I'd love to hear about your experience, or if you have another pattern that I haven't mentioned in this video, I'd love to hear about that as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're enjoying making your hats.